All right. Happy Monday. Oh
Happy
my
Monday.
goodness. How are you doing, Jen?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Last month of the year. It was
It
funny. I was talking
is.
to my kids yesterday about that, and my my daughter said something. She's like, "Oh, not until next year." I was like, "Okay, well, in like 4 weeks then." And they're like,
Right.
"What?" Well,
That's how it works.
right.
This year
Yeah.
ends. Yep.
Yes, right. It's a concept of time. But yeah, so
I
it's
don't have it either.
December.
It's okay.
No, same. So depending on the day and what we're doing, right?
Yep.
It can go, yeah. But anyway, so we're here. Welcome to those of you who are coming in live, and for those attending later, um, to one of our LinkedIn lives. This has been a really fun thing for us to kind of
Oh,
share behind the curtains of what we do and what we talk about on a daily basis,
Yep.
which
Yep.
I don't even know if that's a you're welcome or a
Right.
sorry.
Or sorry. Yeah. My last LinkedIn live was so, behind the curtains for sure.
Mm,
So there was that. I am composed this time.
yeah.
I'm
It was
composed.
human.
I'm human. I'm very human.
Yeah, which was
Welcome to all
great.
my humanness.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's what we talk about
Yep.
all the time.
Yep.
And truly a gift for me at least. So I very much enjoy it. And I think it's a
Well, we do
great
have
thing.
fun. We're not making that up.
No, definitely not. Definitely not at all.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, speaking of the way we see ourselves and
Yeah.
know ourselves, today we are talking about three things that can kind of seem similar and are certainly related, um, but also distinct and different in and of themselves, and kind of a huge piece of how we navigate the world,
Mhm.
truly.
Yep.
And those being self concept, self esteem, and self confidence. And, we kind of, I think we talked about this, you and I had talked about
Mhm.
this recently. And I don't know, it's just a really helpful picture when you're looking at defining yourself as a leader, when you're looking at really putting understanding around who you are as a person, to have an understanding of what these three pieces are and mean, and to judge them isn't necessarily what we want to do, right? It's just really understanding where we are in them at the
Mhm.
moment,
Yep.
and what we want to do with them going forward. So I think maybe going through first and just kind of talking through what are these? What's the difference between self-concept, self-esteem, and self-confidence, right? To kind of help those who might think they're pretty much the same thing, or think they sound very similar. So
Mhm.
so let's start with self-concept. What is self-concept?
So what's so fascinating about these three things before I dive into
Yeah,
self-concept
please.
is I've definitely, I mean, I've even gotten them kind of mixed up or crossed over or they kind of blur.
Mm,
They're all kind of surrounding the same idea, but yet different. So we wanted to break these out for that reason because I think a lot of times we get them confused. I know I get them confused. But I know that when I really sit and think about them, I can understand the difference. So I want to share that real quick and then dive into that a little bit more, I guess. So we're starting with self concept. Self concept is kind of how you see yourself. It's who you are, right? Which we talk about all the time. It's kind of like if you think about your kind of personal assessment of who you are, it's that the things that kind of create that for you. Maybe you say that um, as we talk about who are you, right? We ask that
mhm,
question, who are
yep,
you? And who are you? A lot of times are those roles that we play for everyone else, but it's also the stuff at the core. It's the stuff that makes us really, at the end of the day, who we are. Like our values, our mission, our beliefs, our morals and ethics, all that stuff. But your self concept is kind of understanding that. It's knowing that, it's knowing who you are at that level. But it's also it's I think this is why it gets confusing, because I think for a lot of people, um it's also a little bit about who you believe you are, right?
Mm, mhm.
And I think that's what gets confusing, because I think sometimes those things can change. Our belief in who we are can change.
Mhm.
It's not looking at outside opinion or other people's knowledge of who we are. It's about who we believe we are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that can be tricky for a lot of people.
Definitely. And um I mean, certainly just reflecting back on my own life, from birth to now, that has changed for me over time,
Yeah, for sure.
based on um the experiences that I had within life. I mean, even relationships affect the way that we see ourselves,
Yeah,
right?
for
The people that we surround ourselves with change how we
sure.
view ourselves. When you're I like the I don't remember where I heard it, but at one point I heard, right, you are what you consume, right? And
Hmm.
yes, everyone's heard that, but it's not just about what we eat. It's also
Yeah,
about all the things that we're
yeah,
taking
for
in,
sure.
right?
Yep.
And those inform how we see ourselves and how we show up, and the way that we present ourselves to the world. So it's fascinating to me how much of that outside influence can also play a role, and the amount of time you've had sort of on this earth
Yep.
can do that as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, when they talk about, I know when I studied this, a lot of this comes from the sports psychology world, right? So,
Mhm,
when we're talking with athletes, we're talking about a lot of these concepts
mhm.
around, who you believe you are, how you feel like you show up, the idea of social approval, which we talk about in
Right.
detail sometimes. One of the things that I have found to kind of help lay this out, there are four kind of types of self concept. So I want to just touch on those really quickly to
Yeah.
give you an idea. So there's the public self. It's your view of yourself, kind of, as we know it from the people around us, right? So there's that public self. And that's what I was saying, you know, really the idea of self concept is who you believe you are, not that. But there's a level of that I think that we fall into, which ties into social approval and all of that, right? So that public self. Then there's the self concept itself, which we've talked about, but then there's the actual or they call behavioral self. And that is created by the things you do, your actions, your habits, the just the things you do out in the world, what those things look like create that kind of behavioral self. And then there's the ideal self. The ideal self is who you kind of aspire to be, who you want to be. What is that piece for you that you're driving for, or you're moving towards?
Mhm.
As you said, which is what made me think of this, that whole idea of throughout your life, you're kind of striving towards that ideal self, right? That's kind of
Mhm.
why we're here. And knowing that, I think knowing what that is, we talk about knowing who you are at the core. We also want to know what's your ideal self? What does that look
Yeah.
like? Who is it, that you want to bring forward?
Right.
So it's kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating and a continuous pursuit.
Yeah, always.
Certainly.
It always will be. We never truly arrive.
No. So then, I mean, that just drives you to the next piece, right? If you have this ideal self, how does self-esteem then play a role in that, right?
Yep.
What is the then sort of next step or differentiator between the concept and the esteem piece?
So self-esteem is basically how you feel about who you are, right? So self-esteem is kind of the evaluation of yourself, your assessment or appraisal, I guess, of your self-concept. So, it's that feeling. It's how do you feel about who you believe yourself to be?
Mhm. And it would be interesting for me, again, this is the research side.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
um, of when we have this a self concept or this ideal self, how we're judging up against that,
Yeah.
right?
So what's fascinating about that, and you just hit a nerve with that word, the judging, right? Because that's what we do.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's that whole idea of um, kind of evaluating and looking at and seeing and deciding.
Mhm.
I think the part that is difficult, and there's a kind of a scale, a matrix that I remember seeing when I went through this research and studying this in school, where they um, differentiated uh, self-esteem based on how worthy we believed we were.
Mm.
Okay. So it's kind of like worthiness is up here, unworthy is down here.
Mhm.
And then there's like competence over here and here. Right. So it was
Mhm.
kind of like just a matrix. And there was this worthiness based self esteem or high self esteem, two different
Sure.
things. Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That like hits home. And
Yeah.
then there's the low self esteem or the competence based self esteem.
Right.
So it's really it's deep. This stuff is deep
Yeah.
because now if you're going into this, how worthy am I? That's a whole nother thing, right? Now we're talking
Mhm.
about a whole nother layer of stuff where we are putting value on our own worthiness.
Right.
It's hard.
Oh, it's fascinating. It really is.
Yeah, and I saw this a lot in young athletes. It was
Okay.
fascinating to me because it was kind of like, um, I am bad if I don't, if I make a mistake, right?
Mm.
So I would see these young kids, especially when I coached softball and I was doing a lot of this um, mental game coaching with some of these young softball players, and I remember a lot of times asking about what's the worst thing that could happen if you made a mistake.
Mm.
You're not going to die. And like that was part of our whole like let's take it to that level and now let's work backwards.
Yeah.
And I remember them saying the worst thing that would happen is that I would let someone down.
Mm.
Every single time that was the answer. And then I would ask, okay, let's make a list. Who are those people that you're worried about letting down?
Right.
Okay. Very first one was always coach.
Mm.
Okay. Then it was, teammates. Then it was parents. And it always kind of followed this line, right? My
Yeah.
teammates, my coach, interchangeable. Usually it was coach first, sometimes teammates, depending on age, right?
Sure.
The
Yeah.
older the kid, it was more about their peer.
Sure.
Okay. The younger was usually about who's in charge.
Yep.
And on the field, it was coach, right? So
Yeah.
coach, teammates, and then parents. And every single time, notice who was missing from that list,
Mhm.
right? And I would always ask that. And then they're like, oh, yourself. I'm like,
Yeah.
me? And they're like, no, no, no. I mean, myself. I'm like, see, we can't even say it,
Right.
right? It's really hard to own that. So
Yeah.
then it becomes, no, myself. And
Yeah.
then it's kind of like, yeah. And so why do we leave her off?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
here's that kind of worthiness scale of recognizing that that's a thing, right?
Yeah. Definitely. Well, what's interesting too is that, I mean, even when you first started talking through that, you said, I I'm bad because versus I
That's
I
right.
failed or I made a
That's right.
mistake or I
That's
did
right.
something
Yep.
bad versus immediately going into
Yeah,
I'm
I
bad.
am bad. Correct. Yes, not the thing that happened. And
Right.
even, I mean, even that, it's like, well, it's not bad.
Right.
It's, yeah, even professional athletes make errors.
Yeah.
That.
I've seen the stats.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, shoot, baseball players can make it in the Hall of Fame and, fail 7 out of 10 times.
Right.
That's pretty amazing.
Correct.
So it's
Exactly.
perspective. Yeah, we have to keep that kind of in check.
Yeah. So then we move from self-esteem to self-confidence,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does that look like to have this self-confidence coming from this concept and from the esteem piece?
So the confidence, they're all getting jumbled in my head.
Yeah.
Self-confidence is really my belief in my ability to perform a certain thing, right?
Mm.
To
Mhm.
do a certain task. My belief in my own ability. So that also
Mhm.
can be tough, right?
Yeah.
So I know part of what we want to talk about is kind of how we can lose it, how we can
Yeah.
gain it. So I want to dive into this because I think this is the part that um, we often get kind of backwards. So when we talk about confidence, and this is something that I studied for a while with some sports psychologists, and what we found, which was so fascinating to me and so spot on, is that as a society, we are confused.
Mm.
We are confused because we don't really seem to get a real feel for this confidence thing. Oftentimes, we believe confidence is external, right?
Mm.
So that we can gain it, we can get it from other people, kind of like, giving you the old attaboy, like pat on the back, like good job. And we wait for that. We wait for other
Mm.
people to acknowledge what we've done, to give it to us. But when we think about that, that's kind of late,
Yeah.
right? That's too late if we're waiting till after we did something. We want to
Mhm.
bring confidence before we do the thing because that's how we, can be successful. So, confidence, what we found to be true is that confidence comes from two different places,
Mm.
and both of them we have control over.
Mm.
It's past performance and preparation, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about past performance, you think about, I mean, it's as simple as go back to school for a second in your head. I'm sorry, but we're doing this.
I
And
love school, so for me, it's fine.
yeah, for you, it's fine. For a lot of people, they're like, no thanks.
I know.
But if you go back to, you were going back to school and you were walking into a test that you were not prepared for, how
Mm.
confident did you feel? Not very, right? Maybe confident enough that you would fail, but
Right.
that was it. Uh, and that's a hard feeling to have when you're sitting there, you're looking at it, you're like, am I in the right class? Like, I don't even know what these things are. I
Mm.
definitely studied the wrong thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to when you walk into a test that you were completely prepared for and you look at it, you're like, oh, I got this. 20 minutes, I'm out of here. I know
Mhm.
all of this. This is easy.
Yep.
And it might be the same questions, but what did it have to do with your preparation, right?
Right.
How prepared you were for that thing. So I
Mhm.
think a lot of times preparation, really, we control. We get to decide that. And then obviously past performance, every single one of us can think about a time that we succeeded, right?
Mhm.
Every single one of us. There was something we can go back to say, yeah, okay, I did that well. Every one of us has some sort of something that we do well, and we can kind of lean on that.
Yeah.
So, I think instead of waiting for other people to give it to us, we have to find confidence is internal.
Mhm.
We used to joke about it, say confidence is an inside job. Has
Yeah.
nothing to do with anyone else. It's yours. And don't leave it to chance though.
Yeah.
You know, that's something that you can absolutely affect. And, in the same vein, if you're not prepared and if you can only focus on negative in the past, well, then that's also going to lower your confidence
Mm.
in the same way, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But we should not be thinking externally for other people to affect it. We need to be thinking about how we can affect it ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. It's fascinating, and even thinking about something that I know a lot of people struggle with, like public speaking, for
Yeah.
example.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Nope.
Um. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to look back on every single time you got nervous, you're probably going to keep feeling very nervous
That's it.
about having to do this,
That's it.
right? But yeah, if you're prepared, if you've gone through, what it is you're going to be talking about, all of those things lead up to that, and then you do it often enough,
Yeah.
you got plenty of evidence to back you up.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And I know that that's for a lot of people, that's like number one fear.
Sure.
And I know for me, I'll tell you, I mean, even for me, I remember joking about that. Like, if you would have told me I'd be doing this for a living
Right.
back when I was like, I don't know, 14, 15 years old, I would have told you you had lost your mind.
Right.
Absolutely not. There was no way this ever would have been a thing.
Yeah.
And I some days I'll still tell you that. But I think it's really based on, like you said, your repetition of a thing and your ability to go out and just do it and recognize that, yeah, you know what? I made it through. I didn't die. I'm
Right.
okay. And I can do that. And that kind of informs my ability to do it again.
Yep.
Right. And you get better as you go, because I think you start to believe in that,
Mm-hmm.
that you can stand up and do that.
Yep. Yeah. As I don't remember where I heard this one, but I've navigated through 100% of all the hard things in my life
Yeah.
to this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. You're 10 for 10. You're 100
Yeah.
for 100.
Mm-hmm.
You have 1,000 batting average. You're doing
Yeah.
quite well. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of impressive.
Right.
Yeah. We've survived all the bad stuff so far. So track record tells us we're going to be okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, again, these are just so great and fascinating. I love having the opportunity to talk with you. Is there any last words of wisdom or pieces around this that we want to leave folks with,
For sure.
just around these? Because I think they're so powerful, and to really, it's not like you have to define them today, but
No.
taking the opportunity to even think about what these are and how they apply into your life could be really helpful.
So I'm going to leave you with an exercise to do, because this is something that I used to do with athletes, and it was something that they would even laminate and take with them to competition or put them in their locker or whatever. And they would read them before each competition or game or match or whatever. And what was so fascinating about that is they would come back to me and say, wow, that works. Like, imagine that. Weird,
Okay.
right? And really, it's as simple as this. You can do this on a napkin. You don't even need a fancy piece of paper. I used to have, I built this thing that we called it the confidence resume. And your confidence resume literally is 1 to 10 on a piece of paper. And you're just supposed to sit and, as in a short time frame, don't make this a whole drawn out thing, but write down your strengths. What are those things for you, right? And as you do that, as you practice doing that, it gets easier to do. Because I've watched a lot of people, I would do this with kids, I would do this with adults, and it was difficult for a lot of people. I would say, go ahead and I'm going to give you about a minute. Go ahead and just write down your strengths. And a lot of times people would struggle.
Yeah.
And we oftentimes had no idea, what anyone else is going through. But for some people, that was a really difficult thing in that moment of their lives, or just in general. We're not used to, saying the good stuff. We're used to trying to figure out what we can do better.
Which is actually incredible to have right now at this time of year, because a lot of people are going through their self-evaluation. So that might be a good thing to remind yourself of and remember also.
Yeah. And remember, honestly, you're usually better than you think you are. So, don't beat yourself up over the one little thing that you forgot to do, or the I you didn't dot, or the T you didn't cross this year, when there's 99 other ones that you did. So we'll leave you with that.
As always, thank you, Jen. It was
Thank
wonderful.
you. My pleasure. So good to be with you.
Yeah, we will see everyone next week.